If you use computer imaging in your practice to show your patients what their dream smile could look like, and if you're concerned about what happens if the simulation ends up looking better than the final result, then you're in the right place, because that's exactly what my guest Dr. Larry Brooks and I are about to discuss, and we're starting right now.
And now, Amazon #1 best-selling author, Dr. Tom, the Gyms Guy, Orent.
Larry, thanks so much for joining me. How are you today?
Great, thanks. Great.
It is so good to have you with us. Talk to me, if you would, why do we use imaging? Why use cosmetic imaging?
It's very important, Tom. People have extensive dentistry done for three basic reasons that I can think of. One is pain, the other is disease, and then how do I look? So that's only one out of three. That's pretty important to nail that when you're presenting your dentistry. There's no way to show a person how they're going to look except with pictures. I know there's a lot of talk about doing intraoral carvings and doing mock-ups in the mouth, but that's already intervening. These pictures that we're talking about with simulations are much more gentle and work very well.
There can be a big disconnect if the person who's doing the imaging doesn't have really intimate knowledge of what we can do chairside as dentists, and what we can do right in the patient's mouth. And then there's this big disconnect. So understandably, there's a lot of dentists who come to me and they say, well, if I'm going to use imaging, what happens if I can't deliver a final case that's actually better looking than the imaging? What if my case doesn't look as good as the imaging? So what do you say to that?
Well, I heard that same argument back in 1987 when we started. I was giving a talk at Tufts, and that question came up and people were very distraught. We finished 250,000 simulations by now and 8,000 cases in our lab of taking those simulations and making cases, and it works great, never a problem. So I think the dentists are using the simulations properly. That is to give patients an idea of what's going on. I think, my experience, and I think you've told me this too, Tom, the cases seem to always look better in the mouth than they do on the simulations. And so all I can tell you is it's worked for thousands of cases by now.
When I was practicing in the two practices, my passion was aesthetic reconstruction, did an enormous amount of smile redesign, and I did imaging since the very first imaging system, which has got to be late 1980s, early 1990s, and I never had a single case where I finished the case and the patient said, wait a minute, this doesn't look as good as the imaging.
If there ever will be a problem, it'll be with imaging close-ups. Patients looking at the close-up image, looking at the teeth in their mirror, and saying they're not exactly the same. So I really encourage using full face. How about you?
I appreciate that you brought that up for two reasons. One is exactly what you just said. I mean, if you zoom in like that, yeah, maybe they will find fault because there's a little bit difference here or there. And two, the patient isn't emotionally charged or changed by looking at just teeth and lips. Patient needs to see what they are going to look like. What's their face? What's their whole smile? Not just the teeth. So yeah, I would only image full face and I would stay away from close-up. So what are a couple of the things that dentists should be doing to help ensure that the patients are as happy with those actual results? So we said we can do it, but we didn't really get into how do you do that. So if you could get into the how do we ensure that the final result is actually better?
I think it's important for the dentist to really examine the simulation. First of all, to get the patients, yes, that they like what they see. We can't know what the patient is thinking and exactly what the doctor is thinking either when we draw the simulation, although we do have instructions from the doctor which we closely follow. But only when it's done can people really see it. And so we probably redraw 1 out of 15, something like that, of our simulations come back, and we have to make changes, make them longer, brighter, bigger, wider, and so on. I think that's great. I think that once the patient has accepted what they see and like it, then you're likely to have few problems in making the actual case. So now you're asking me how to actually make that happen. And I think you need to use a good lab that knows what they're doing and can create the proper change from the imaging to the actual teeth. In other words, the next step is to go from the picture to a 3D replica.
Larry, what are a couple of the things that dentists should be doing in order to help ensure that the patients are going to be really happy with the results?
Make sure that the person doing the drawings knows some dentistry and is following good clinical practices. Then the dentist has to examine the simulation very carefully and feel comfortable that they can proceed. If not, we have devised ways that they can practice it and pre-do the case before actually starting.
Larry, another thing that we found is that one of the foundations of where you're starting with these simulations is where are the canines. So, for example, the canines need to be imaged in at least close to where they were in the real case. I see some simulations where, they put a nice smile on, but they just basically pulled the smile off of somebody else's face and image or dropped it in Photoshop into that person's mouth. Now the canines are 2-3 millimeters to the left, to the right, or to the outside, and we could do that case. It would look beautiful, but we're going to need to do orthodontics first. You can't just put veneers on a tooth that isn't where it is. So
we work with artificial intelligence, by the way, Tom, and still not able to apply it. It takes somebody who knows to.
It's interesting that you brought that up. There was a company, I forget the name, but there was a company a few years ago who said to me, "Oh, I know you guys do a lot of imaging and you do it for your members," and which we used to do. We haven't done that in years, but when we did, this guy came to me and he said, you should use our software and tell your members about it. So he sent it to me and I tried it, and you know what? It was terrible. The artificial intelligence didn't come close to it wasn't good. Talk about what happens if the patient has a gummy smile and whoever's doing the simulation, they pull that up, but we never tell the patient anything about how we're going to do that case. So chat about that if you would.
Well, that all the viewers know that that's a real problem. I mean, if you're going to do an osteectomy or something and remove a piece of the maxilla, you can move the whole thing. Otherwise, just moving the gums and moving the teeth in the picture aren't going to get there. I just finished such a case, and the dentist asked me to redraw it several times because until he told me he was going to do those things, I wouldn't do it in the picture. I hope now he'll follow through and know what to do.
The idea of the simulation is to help the doctor and the patient get on the same page and help motivate the patient to actually accept the care. So it has to be a reasonable representation of something the dentist can actually do. Another example of something that we can't do unless they're going to do surgery would be, let's say somebody has a really narrow palate. You and I were discussing before we started this interview, we were chatting offline a little bit about, if somebody has a really narrow arch and so their teeth are kind of like that, and you want to give them a nice broad smile, well, if we just send them imaging that shows a beautiful broad smile, you and I know, and so does the viewer, you guys know as a doctor that the only way you're going to be able to do that is with a palatal expansion. So you can't just say to the patient, "Oh, we'll put veneers on and it's going to look like this."
That's why we need explicit directions from the dentist, and our website allows for that. Type in exactly what the doctor plans to do to guide us along, to give back what in fact is reasonable.
It's interesting you bring that up because now you've actually taken us much more in depth, which is great, because what you've said is it's not just a matter of communicating between the doctor and the patient, unless or until the doctor communicates with you, the imaging artist, exactly what they're looking for and how they're going to achieve that. Then you really can't have that A to Z soup to nuts result. So, Larry, in my opinion, the best case scenario for the most beautiful but achievable imaging, because you can make beautiful imaging that isn't achievable, and you can make achievable imaging that looks lousy and is not going to motivate the patient at all. So in my opinion, the best case scenario is the imaging is accomplished by somebody who has worked as a wet-fingered dentist, so the imager knows really what is involved in actually doing the case. And you and I have both been wet-fingered dentists for a long time. Has actually performed this type of cosmetic work, has a deep understanding of the lab's role, because again, you might understand what I want to do chairside, but if you don't understand what the lab or can or cannot do, also that person doing the imaging and or his team is basically an expert at imaging. Now, I know you've worked in all three roles, which is kind of cool because I actually don't know, and I know a lot of people in aesthetic dentistry. I know a lot of people in the lab world. Through the AACD, where I was accredited and was an accreditation examiner, I met a lot of people, but you are, and I've never told you this, you are the only person I know who is a cosmetic dentist who practiced cosmetic dentistry chairside, has owned and operated a lab with, what did you have, 10 lab technicians working under you? Yeah, so you had a big team there. And you mentioned a few moments ago that you and your team have done over 250,000 imaging. So I think that's pretty cool. One thing that we didn't talk about that I would suggest, and I know you and I agree because I know you've got this on your website, no matter who does your imaging, even if you're doing it yourselves or your team does it, no matter who does your imaging, I would recommend having your attorney, and I did this in my practices, I would recommend having your attorney write just a short little release, something to the effect of, images are for the purposes of illustration only and are in no way any kind of guarantee. Now, that's only one sentence, but your attorney can make it into 2 or 3 sentences. I'm sure they will. But even if it's just 2 or 3 sentences, that's a good thing because it communicates to the patient, no, this isn't exactly what you're going to look like, but this kind of gives you an idea.
Written on our website also, Tom, just so you know. So when
Awesome.
Patients look at the pictures via the website, which they can do through a link sent, that will appear.
I'm glad that you brought up the website. Tell our viewers how they can reach you, and I know that you wanted to make a little bit of a special offer to our YouTube viewers, so tell us a little bit about that.
I'd like people to get acquainted with our imaging service and see for themselves how it works. So if you're new to Smile Vision, type in the web 2 free simulations. It's written on the bar below, and sign up. We'll give you 2 free ones, then send some pictures and see for yourself how it works. We'll help you.
That's a really cool offer. I appreciate that, Larry. For our viewers, getting a couple of free simulations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the description below. So for the viewers, doctors, if you just go right below the video, you'll be able to click on the link and take advantage of Larry's offer, which is the 2 free simulations. Larry, thank you so much for being here and appreciate your sharing with our YouTube audience.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure.
Always my pleasure. I hope to have you back soon. Would you like to reduce your dependence on PPOs by at least 25% while helping more of your patients achieve optimal health and add $300,000 to your practice while working 1 less day per week? Do you ever wake up feeling like your practice is a train wreck and secretly you just don't want to do this anymore? Do you start out every day wondering where are the patients and the money going to come from? Do you see other dentists making the kind of income that you want and you have no idea how they're doing it? Do you worry that you're getting another year closer to when you should retire, but you're slipping further and further away from ever having a financially secure retirement? Do you resent having to write off 15%, 20%, or maybe even more to network PPOs while your team members spend more time chasing claims than helping your patients? At the end of the month, are there way more bills to pay than money in your bank account? And are you spending way too much time at the office and precious little time with the ones you love? If any of that sounds familiar, I have good news for you. It doesn't have to be that way, and changing your situation does not mean you have to work any harder. In fact, many of my members have reduced their dependence on PPOs. They've increased by 200,000, 300,000 or more. They've helped more of their patients achieve optimal health, even while working 1 less day per week. A couple of decades ago, 15 years into practice, I came within 3 days of losing my home and my office. It was back then that I heard Stephen Covey say, if your ladder isn't leaning against the right wall, every step you take just gets you to the wrong place faster. I was working hard but falling deeper into debt. I was a good dentist, but I could barely feed my family. During my 6 years as an AACD accreditation examiner and while attending the Doesnt Continuum, I had the opportunity to meet many of the most successful dentists across America. I began to realize there was a huge difference between dentists. While many dentists continued to struggle, working hard but never able to catch up financially, others were achieving income levels that literally blew my mind. Personal net incomes of $500,000, $750,000 from their practice, and more. So over time, I started to look at what were those ultra-successful dentists doing. I realized there are things that the top 1% earners in dentistry are doing that everybody else wasn't. So I started incorporating those things into my practice, and in the first year, I grew $200,000, and then $300,000 and more. So I started sharing those things with my members, and they got incredible results as well. When Pete Dawson wrote the foreword to one of my books, he wrote me a letter in which he said, "Tom, I've turned down just about every request for forewords, so I'm really counting on you to carry the torch for quality and to help me get more dentists to understand what they need to know about occlusion, TMJ, and complete dentistry." He ended the letter with, "You'll be a good missionary. Good luck, Pete." Well, Pete was right. We have an obligation to our patients to let them know about the life-changing benefits of optimal oral health. You can continue to overwhelm yourself and your team by trying to do too many of the wrong things all at once while your ladder is positioned against the wrong wall. You can keep doing 1 and 2 tooth dentistry because that's all insurance is going to cover. You can keep grinding away and working your fingers to the bone. Or if you want to help your patients achieve the optimal health that they deserve, if you want to perform more prosthetic quadrant dentistry, if you want to get paid your full fee, if you want to add $200,000, even $300,000 a year while working less, if that's what you want, then here's what I have for you. My team and I have set aside some time in the next 48 hours to speak with you personally about how you can apply these ideas in your practice starting today. Whatever your biggest challenges are, we have seen them and we know how to help you overcome them. We'll get on the phone for about an hour, and during your breakthrough strategy session, we'll work with you to craft a step-by-step game plan to hit your revenue goals, whether that's to increase $200,000, $300,000, or more. We'll come up with a plan to reduce your dependence on PPOs by at least 25%, help your patients achieve optimal health, even while you're working 1 day less per week. The cost? It's absolutely free. But here's the catch. The breakthrough strategy session's not for everyone. Here's who it is for. You must be a general dentist, you must own your own practice, and you must be in solo or small group private practice. You also have to have a burning desire to help your patients achieve optimal health. If that's you, book a breakthrough strategy session right now. Spaces are limited. Go to gems12.com. Again, book your complimentary Roadmap to Freedom breakthrough strategy session at gems12.com. There's a link in the description below. And remember, you're only one gem away.